Chapter 1, 10 years. Built in silence. For 10 years, I had learned how to disappear, not in the dramatic sense, not in the way people noticed. I disappeared into competence. I was the first one in the office most mornings, my heels clicking softly against the polished floors before the lights were even fully on. I knew the smell of fresh printer toner better than coffee. I knew which conference rooms echoed and which ones swallowed sound. I knew how my boss liked his reports formatted, his emails phrased, his meetings paced, and most importantly, I knew how to make him look good. My name is Claire Mitchell, and for a decade, I worked as a senior operations manager at a mid-sized consulting firm in Chicago. Not flashy. Not famous. But stable. Respectable. The kind of place people stayed at for years, sometimes entire careers. At least, that's what I thought I was doing. I joined the company at 27, fresh out of a master's program, ambitious but careful. I wasn't the loudest voice in meetings, but I was always prepared. I didn't interrupt, but when I spoke, people listened. Slowly, almost invisibly, I became the person everyone relied on. When a project was failing, they handed it to me. When a client was upset, they asked me to step in. When deadlines were impossible, my calendar somehow made space. My boss, Mark Reynolds, liked to call me dependable. At first, it felt like a compliment. Claire's solid, he'd say in meetings, she'll handle it. She doesn't need supervision. What he never said was leadership. I noticed that word was always reserved for others, for the louder ones, the sharper elbows, the ones who talked more than they listened. Still, I stayed. Because I believed in something dangerously simple: if you work hard long enough, someone eventually notices. Year 3 passed, then 5. Then 8. By year 10, I had trained 3 managers who now technically outranked me. I told myself it didn't matter. Titles were just titles. What mattered was impact. Respect. Trust. Or at least, that's what I said out loud. The truth was, I was tired of staying late and leaving quietly, tired of being the backbone without the spine getting any credit, tired of watching promotions announced like celebrations I was never invited to. Still, when Mark scheduled an all-hands meeting titled Organizational Alignment and Role Optimization, I allowed myself to hope. Hope is sneaky like that. The meeting was set for a Tuesday morning. The large glass conference room, the one reserved for important announcements. People whispered as they walked in, coffee cups in hand, speculating: new client? Restructuring? Promotions? Someone leaned toward me and smiled. Maybe this is finally your moment. I smiled back. I shouldn't have. Mark stood at the head of the table, hands clasped, confidence practiced. The projector hummed behind him, a slide with neat boxes and arrows glowing on the screen. He cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. As the company grows, we need to ensure everyone is in the right role to maximize efficiency. My stomach tightened just slightly. The word efficiency always made me nervous. He continued, clicking through slides. Names shifted. Departments moved. People nodded. A few murmured approval. Then my name appeared. Claire Mitchell, he said, glancing up at me briefly. After careful consideration, we've decided to reassign your role. The room went quiet. Reassign, not promote, not elevate. Reassign. He smiled, like this was a favor. You've done great work, he added quickly, but honestly, anyone can do your job. The words landed hard. Anyone can do your job. I felt heat rush to my face. My ears rang. For a moment, I wasn't sure if he had said it loudly or if it just echoed because it was so cruel. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone cleared their throat. No one spoke. Mark kept going, unaware, or unconcerned. We're moving you into a support-focused role. Less strategic, more operational. It frees up leadership bandwidth. Support. After 10 years, I looked around the room. Some faces avoided mine. Others looked apologetic. 1 or 2 looked relieved it wasn't them. Mark ended with a shrug, almost casual. Like I said, this role isn't unique. Anyone can do it. That's when something inside me went very still, not angry, not loud, just cold, because what Mark didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that for the past 18 months, I hadn't just been doing my job, I had been doing his, and I had proof. Chapter 2, What They Never Asked About. After the meeting ended, no one spoke to me right away. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. Laptops snapped shut. People filed out in small clusters, conversations muted, eyes carefully redirected toward phones or schedules or anything that wasn't me. I stayed seated for a moment longer than necessary, not because I was stunned, though I was, but because I had learned something important over the years. When people think you've been diminished, they stop watching you closely. That was my advantage. I gathered my notebook, closed my laptop with deliberate calm, and walked back to my desk like nothing had happened. The open office buzzed with the familiar rhythm of typing and murmured calls, but it felt different now, like the air had shifted slightly. A few coworkers glanced up, some offered tight smiles, some looked away too quickly. One whispered, "I'm so sorry." As I passed, I nodded, professional. Controlled. Inside, something else was happening. I wasn't replaying Mark's words over and over. I wasn't spiraling into self-doubt. I wasn't asking myself if he was right, because I knew exactly how wrong he was. What no one had ever asked, what Mark had never bothered to understand, was what my job actually included. My title said Senior Operations Manager. My workload said something very different. 18 months earlier, Mark's workload had quietly doubled. The company had landed 2 major clients within the same quarter. The board was pushing for expansion. Pressure rolled downhill, as it always does, and Mark started missing things, deadlines, details, entire conversations. At first, I stepped in without thinking. I always had. I took notes during meetings he half attended, I followed up on emails he forgot to send, I smoothed over misunderstandings before they reached clients. Then, slowly, subtly, my role expanded. He started forwarding me messages with, "Can you handle this?" Then, "Can you decide?" Then, eventually, nothing at all, just assumptions that it was already done. I attended strategy calls under his name. I drafted proposals he presented as his own, I negotiated timelines, budgets, and deliverables. The board didn't know my name, but they knew my work, and I documented everything, not out of paranoia, out of habit. I kept folders, email trails, version histories. When you're the one fixing everything, you learn to protect yourself quietly. By the time Mark announced my reassignment, I had effectively been acting as a shadow director of operations for over a year. Anyone can do your job. I almost laughed at the irony. That afternoon, Mark called me into his office. "Claire," he said, leaning back in his chair, hands folded behind his head. "I just want to make sure you're okay with the change." Okay. I looked at the framed awards on his wall, team achievements, leadership recognitions, plaques with his name engraved in bold letters. "I understand the decision," I said evenly. He smiled, relieved. "Good. This frees you up to focus on execution. You're great at that." Execution, another word that meant invisible labor. Of course, I replied. He nodded, already moving on. "Oh, and I'll need you to prep the materials for Friday's board check-in." "Just the usual." "The usual." As I walked out, I felt something settle into place, not resentment, clarity. That night, I didn't go home right away. I stayed long after the office emptied, long after the janitorial staff passed through. I sat at my desk with my laptop open, the city lights blinking through the windows. I opened a folder labeled simply, Operations, Internal. Inside were subfolders by date. Emails showing approvals Mark never gave but later claimed credit for, documents with tracked changes revealing my fingerprints everywhere, calendar invites where he was absent, but decisions were made anyway. Then there was the file I had never needed before. A draft proposal addressed not to Mark but to the board. IT wasn't aggressive. IT wasn't emotional. IT was factual. A breakdown of operational leadership over the last 18 months. A clear mapping of who made which decisions. Metrics tied directly to outcomes, and at the bottom, a simple line asterisk prepared by Claire Mitchell asterisk. I didn't send it, not yet, because timing matters. The next morning, my reassignment began. My responsibilities were officially reduced. Strategic meetings removed from my calendar. Decision-making authority quietly reassigned to a newly promoted manager named Jason. Jason was young, confident, eager to prove himself. He stopped by my desk around noon. "Hey," he said awkwardly, "I'm stepping into some of your old stuff. Mark said you could walk me through things?" I looked up at him. "Of course," I said, and I did. I explained processes, but not context, steps, but not nuance, what, but not why, not because I wanted him to fail, but because no one had ever asked me to teach leadership. They had only ever asked me to absorb consequences. By Wednesday, cracks started to show. A client emailed, confused about a timeline change. A deliverable stalled. Waiting for approval that never came. A meeting ran long, unfocused, unproductive. Mark grew irritated. He paced more, snapped faster, checked his phone constantly. On Thursday afternoon, I received an email subject urgent. Board materials from Mark Reynolds. Claire, I need the finalized deck. Board call moved to tomorrow morning. ASAP. I stared at the screen. The deck he was referring to, the one summarizing operational performance, was built on my data, my decisions, my work, and for the first time, I didn't respond immediately. I closed my laptop, not forever, just long enough, because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do after being told anyone can do your job, is let them try. Chapter 3, When Silence Starts Costing Money. Friday morning arrived faster than it should have. By 8:12 a.m., Mark was already pacing the length of the office, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and tight. The board call had been moved up again, now scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp. No room for delays. No margin for error and no finalized deck. I knew this because at 8:14, my inbox chimed again, from Mark Reynolds subject need deck now. Claire, where are we on the materials? This is critical. I stared at the email for a long moment. 10 years had trained me to respond instantly. 10 years had wired my nervous system to fix problems that weren't technically mine, but this time, I didn't feel panicked, I felt distanced. I typed a calm reply. Hi Mark, I haven't been included on the updated scope since my reassignment. Let me know what you'd like me to prioritize. Polite, professional, documented. I hit send and leaned back in my chair across the office. I could feel the tension building. Jason, the newly promoted manager, was hunched over his laptop, flipping between spreadsheets with a furrowed brow. He looked up twice, scanning the room like he was searching for something he couldn't name. Context. By 8:30, the first mistake surfaced. A senior client emailed directly to Mark, and copied the board liaison, questioning a cost overrun that had been approved weeks earlier, except Jason hadn't known it was approved, because that approval had come during one of those meetings Mark missed. The one I attended. The one I documented. The one no one had ever officially acknowledged I led. Jason responded cautiously, promising clarification, but clarity requires knowledge. At 8:41, a second issue, the revenue projections in the draft deck didn't match last quarter's actuals. The discrepancy wasn't huge, but it was noticeable. And to board members, noticeable is dangerous. Mark snapped. Who pulled these numbers? He barked across the room. Jason froze. I used the shared folder. The shared folder I used to maintain, the one no one had updated since I stopped doing it. Mark rubbed his temples. Claire. I looked up. Yes? He gestured sharply. Can you come here? I walked over calmly, every step measured. What's going on? I asked. He lowered his voice. The numbers are off. We need the correct projections. Now. I can help, I said, but I'll need access to the strategic assumptions behind the revisions. Jason shifted uncomfortably. I thought those were finalized. I met his eyes gently. They were, last quarter. Silence. Mark exhaled sharply. Fine. Just fix it. Fix it. There it was again. The expectation. The default. I nodded. I'll need about 30 minutes. Mark glanced at the clock. You have 15. I didn't argue. I returned to my desk and opened the folder I hadn't touched all week. Within minutes, the patterns reappeared, the logic behind the numbers, the decisions layered beneath the surface. This was familiar territory. This was my work. I corrected the projections. Added footnotes. Included explanations, and then I stopped because something was missing. The narrative. The board didn't just want numbers. They wanted to understand why things had worked, and who had driven that success. For the first time, I didn't add that layer. I sent Mark the updated file exactly as requested. Clean. Accurate. Bare. At 8:59, the board call began. I wasn't invited, but the conference room walls were thinned. I could hear Mark's voice through the glass, confident at first, then gradually strained. Questions came faster. Follow-up stacked. The board pressed on operational decisions Mark couldn't fully explain. Who led that initiative? What informed that timeline? Why was this adjustment made without a formal vote? Mark hesitated. He deflected, generalized, gave half answers. The room grew quiet in a way that felt heavy, not respectful. Then someone asked the question I had been waiting for. Mark, one of the board members said slowly, can you walk us through the operational leadership structure for the past year? A pause. Well, Mark began, it's been a team effort. Another pause. Specifically, the board member continued, who has been responsible for execution and decision-making at the operational level? Silenced, I watched Mark's reflection in the glass. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked, briefly, toward my desk. I knew that look. It was the look of someone realizing they'd built their success on something they never bothered to name. The call ended 10 minutes later, not with congratulations, with a request, ***, we'd like a detailed report on operational leadership and accountability. By Monday. Mark emerged from the room pale. He didn't look at Jason. He didn't look at anyone. He walked straight to me. Claire, he said quietly, I need you in my office. Inside, the door closed softly. He didn't sit. I need that report, he said. You know what they're asking for? I nodded. Yes. He hesitated. Can you help me frame it? Frame it. I met his eyes. I can write it, I said evenly. Accurately. Another pause. What do you mean? He asked. I continued, the report will reflect who made which decisions, and when. It will include documentation. His face changed. Claire, I'm not trying to embarrass anyone, I said calmly. But the board asked for clarity. He swallowed. You understand how this looks? I did. Perfectly, I do, I said. And I also understand what it costs when leadership isn't clear. Mark leaned back, suddenly tired. Just send me a draft. I will, I replied. That evening, as the office emptied once more, I opened the file I'd prepared days ago, the one addressed to the board. I updated it with timestamps, with evidence, with truth, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I sent it. Chapter 4. When the truth has a timestamp. The email left my outbox at 9:47 p.m. Dramatic flourish. No follow-up message. No explanation. Just a subject line that read **** operational leadership and accountability report, FY review ****. I shut my laptop and sat there for a moment, listening to the low hum of the building after hours. The city outside my window was alive, sirens in the distance, lights flickering on and off, but inside me, everything felt strangely quiet. I slept that night deeply, for the first time in weeks. Monday morning arrived with a tension so thick it felt physical. By 8:30 a.m., the executive floor was buzzing. Assistants whispered. Phones rang and stopped abruptly. People moved with purpose but avoided eye contact, like something invisible was about to detonate. At 8:52, my calendar updated, ***, 9:15 a.m., board follow-up meeting ****, location ****, executive conference room ****, attendees board members, CEO, Director of Operations added Claire Mitchell Director of Operations, not Mark. My pulse stayed steady, but my hands went cold. Mark appeared at my desk moments later. He looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was crooked, his confidence, once so effortless, now frayed at the edges. They added you, he said unnecessarily. Yes, I replied. He hesitated. I didn't expect them to move this fast. They asked for clarity, I said. You gave them information. Not quite the same thing. The conference room felt different this time. The board members were already seated when we walked in, laptops open, expressions neutral but focused. The CEO nodded at me with polite recognition, nothing more, nothing less. Mark sat 2 seats away from me. He didn't meet my eyes. The chair of the board spoke first. Thank you both for joining. We've reviewed the report. A pause. It was thorough. I kept my posture straight, hands folded loosely in front of me. The board member continued, scrolling through his screen. What stood out most was the consistency of decision-making attribution. Timelines. Documentation. Email chains. He looked up. Claire, can you walk us through your role over the past 18 months? Mark stiffened. I inhaled slowly. Yes, I said. 18 months ago, Mark began delegating operational decisions due to increased client volume. Initially, this involved implementation oversight. Over time, it expanded to include strategy execution, budget approvals within scope, and cross-department coordination. No embellishment. No accusation, just facts. Another board member leaned forward. And were these responsibilities formally assigned? No, I replied. They evolved organically. I documented decisions to ensure continuity and risk mitigation. And Mark, the chair asked, turning to him, were you aware of the extent of this delegation? Mark cleared his throat. I was aware. Claire was supporting heavily. Supporting, the chair didn't react. He simply turned back to me. Claire, in your professional assessment, did the reassignment announced last week align with the actual operational structure? The room held its breath. No, I said calmly. It did not. Silence followed, not uncomfortable, but deliberate. Then the CEO spoke. Claire, why didn't we know this sooner? I answered honestly. Because I was never asked. That was the moment the power shifted, not dramatically, not explosively, but unmistakably. The board excused Mark from the room. He stood, face flushed, jaw tight, and left without a word. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The chair exhaled slowly. Claire, we owe you an apology. I hadn't expected that. For clarity, he continued, we're not interested in assigning blame today. We're interested in alignment, accountability, and leadership. Another board member nodded. Your report demonstrates operational leadership in practice, not just title. The CEO folded his hands. We'd like to discuss formalizing your role. There it was, not revenge, not humiliation, recognition. They didn't offer platitudes. They offered specifics, expanded authority, direct reporting line to the board, compensation aligned with responsibility, and a title that finally matched the work I had already been doing. *** Director of Operations, *** effective immediately. I accepted without celebration, because this wasn't a victory. LAP.IT was a correction. When I returned to the open office, the atmosphere had changed. People looked up, really looked. Jason stood as I passed. Claire, I just wanted to say. I didn't realize. I smiled gently. Most people don't. Mark wasn't at his desk. He emailed later that afternoon. Short. Professional, I misjudged the scope of your contributions. I wish you the best in your new role. No apology. No acknowledgement of the words he'd used. Anyone can do your job. I closed the email without responding, because the truth no longer needed defending. By Friday, the org chart had been updated. So had the culture. Meetings were sharper. Decisions clearer. Accountability named, and for the first time in 10 years, when someone said my name in a room, it meant something out loud. Chapter 5. What anyone never sees. The first thing that changed wasn't my title. It was the questions. People stopped asking me to fix things at the last minute and started asking me before decisions were made. Meetings had agendas again. Follow-ups had owners. Silence no longer masked confusion, it signaled agreement. Power, I learned, isn't loud. It's precise. In my first week as Director of Operations, I sat in the same glass conference room where Mark had reassigned me in front of everyone. Same table. Same chairs. Same city skyline behind the screen, but this time, when I spoke, no one interrupted. I wasn't proving anything. I wasn't defending myself. I was simply doing the work, out in the open. The board checked in weekly at first. Not to monitor me, but to understand systems they'd never fully seen. They asked thoughtful questions. They listened to answers instead of waiting to talk. One afternoon, the CEO said something that stayed with me. We confused quiet with replaceable. I nodded. That confusion costs companies more than they ever admit. Mark returned 2 weeks later, not as my boss. As a peer. Technically, his role had been refocused. Strategy without operational oversight. A polite way of saying boundaries had been drawn where none existed before. Our first interaction was brief. He stopped by my office. My office now. Not a shared space or borrowed room. Congratulations, he said. His voice was neutral, controlled. Thank you, I replied. He hesitated. I didn't realize how much you were carrying. I looked at him, really looked. I know, I said. That was all, not because I didn't have more to say but because I no longer needed him to understand. Over the next months, things stabilized. Revenue steadied. Turnover dropped. Clients stopped escalating issues that never should have reached them in the first place. Jason grew into his role, with guidance, not pressure. He thanked me once, quietly, for teaching him how to think instead of what to do. One evening, long after most people had gone home, I sat alone in my office and opened an old folder. 10 years of work, emails, presentations, notes no one ever read. I didn't feel bitterness, I felt clarity. For a long time, I believed recognition was something you earned by being indispensable. I was wrong. Indispensable people are often invisible, until they stop holding everything together. The truth is, when someone says, anyone can do your job, they're usually revealing something about themselves. They don't see the thinking behind the execution, the judgment behind the process, the restraint behind the results. They see outcomes and assume inevitability. Anyone can follow instructions. Not anyone can build systems that don't collapse when no one is watching. A year later, during a leadership retreat, a new hire asked me for advice. How do you make sure your work gets noticed? She asked. I smiled. You don't. I said. You make sure your absence would be. She looked confused. I didn't explain, because some lessons only land when you've lived them. On my way out that night, I passed the same conference room again. Empty. Quiet. Glass reflecting the city lights. I remembered Mark's voice. Anyone can do your job. He was wrong, not because I was extraordinary but because what I did was never just a job. It was judgment, responsibility, and the courage to stay quiet until the truth had nowhere left to hide, and when it finally surfaced, it spoke for itself.